These days, we're all looking for comfort anywhere we can find it. Thank goodness for Landlubbers Raw Bar and Grill in the Plantation location, because they are making sure you are as comfortable as possible. First of all, they're not only open for delivery and pickup. All you have to do is go to landlubbersbarandgrill.com for both pickup and free delivery. Their hours have changed a little bit. Monday through Thursday from 3:30 to 10, and Friday, Saturday, and Sunday from 11:30 to 10. You're going to have the best wings in the world. You're going to have a great burger. You're going to have their amazing soups. Again, Landlubbers, Raw Bar and Grill. It's nice and easy. Just go to landlubbersbarandgrill.com for both your pickup and free delivery. Thank goodness for Landlubbers for making you always feel right at home.
Hey, folks, Tony Segreto here. Let me ask you a question. What do you look for when you go out to eat? Good food, obviously. Friendly atmosphere, not too loud, but good energy, reasonable prices, and a place where you feel comfortable. All those ingredients, no pun meant there, are hard to find unless you're talking about the Texas Roadhouse. You see, they encompass all of those attributes. Really, really good food, amazing atmosphere, good for a family, good for a date, or just a night out for yourself, and prices that will make you extremely happy. Their ribs, unmatched. Steaks, hand-cut every day. Everything, and I mean everything, is made on site, including their incredible bread. It's the one day, folks, that you can forget about low-carb diets. Trust me when I tell you, Texas Roadhouse, your restaurant, your destination when you say, where should we go and eat tonight?
Welcome, one and all, to the Defo Show with Lubie. No Defo, just Lubie here on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Brought to you by the phenomenal people at Water Cleanup of Florida. It was a rain-filled weekend. Hopefully nothing happened to your homes, but if something did, you can be as confident as if nothing had happened because you have Water Cleanup of Florida right there to help you out. Again, you can contact them, like I say, each and every day, 24/7, with over 60 years of combined experience between Robert, Michael, and their team. You know you're going to get quality work. Plus, the fact that they have licensed contractors, they not only will come out, check your issues, whether it's water, fire, mold damage, but they'll be able to fix the issue. Which, again, aren't we all looking for easy? Life is so hard. Life is so taxing. There's so much getting thrown at you each and every day. Don't you want someone to just make it easier for you? Water Cleanup of Florida will do that. Just give them a call, 954-579-0356, 954-579-0356. Check them out on the website, WCUFL.com, WCUFL.com. If you mention 5 Reasons or Lubie, 5 Reasons or Lubie, you'll get a free inspection during business hours. Check them out on their socials, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, at Water Cleanup FL. Water Cleanup of Florida. We clean up your schmutz. It was schmutzy, as I said, weather-wise down here in South Florida. It also was interesting when it came to the sports scene. Coco Gauff falls in the finals of the French Open. The Miami Heat, we're hearing of possible wheeling and dealing. And you had Game 2 Sunday of the NBA Finals. I focus on the basketball side of things with one only Grant Long. Today, Grant Long played for the Heat for a long time, playing the NBA over 15 years. Now as an analyst for the Detroit Pistons, he joins me today on the Defo Show. No Defo, just Lubie, here on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. This gentleman has been joining us for years. Someone talk about South Florida sports. He's been a big part of the South Florida sports scene since the 90s, maybe late 80s, actually. He was a part of the first Miami Heat team. And we're honored and privileged to have him quite regularly talking NBA. The one and only Grant Long joins me this morning. Good morning, Grant. How you doing?
It's going pretty good, man. How are you? Engulfed in the finals, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm engulfed. I'm sad by the finals because the Miami Heat are not there, but it's been an interesting series so far. It's been close for first halves, and then the second halves have been both interesting in both games. Before we do move on to the finals, I do want to touch on the Heat for a second, an organization you still follow to this day. You currently are a Detroit Pistons analyst, but, you know, you cover the league at large and always have, you've been very honest with us that the Heat still hold special place in your heart. What were your thoughts about the Eastern Conference Finals and the effort that Miami put up, even though they were, it seemed by the end of it, pretty done?
Yeah, it appeared that they were pretty spent. And listen, we are, a couple of weeks removed from that final game, and people are still asking me, do you think that shot by Jimmy Butler was one? Still talking about that shot, and I tell people, you know what? I'm gonna roll with whatever Jimmy Butler's decision was. He felt like wasn't like the guy's not a good 3-point shooter. It's Jimmy Butler. He's the guy. He's the main reason that they're in that position to begin with. So it's an old saying, but you know what you got to do? You got to dance with the girl you came with. And that's what Eric Spoelstra did. You know, he that's the guy who got him there. He's made decisions all season long. He felt like that was the best decision, and I'm going to live with that. I'm going to roll with that. If it goes in, nobody's even talking about that. And like I said, he's a qualified three-point shooter. Could he have gone to the basket? Perhaps he could have. Probably made the basket. Yeah, for sure he probably could have. But I'm going to live with his decision and say it was a good one and retool and come back. Listen, it's a whole lot of teams, a few teams out there right now, Philadelphia, Minnesota, Chicago, they're all kicking themselves for letting Jimmy Butler go. The Miami Heat won't make it, guarantee you.
Well, and what's interesting, and there's a lot to unpack with that, Grant. First, I did a 180 on it because in the game, I'm just watching the situation. I'm like, Jimmy Butler's rolling right now. The Heat are rolling, and Al Horford is an older big. So, of course, you go up on them, you get the basket. But there's a lot that went into it. First of all, Jimmy Butler, again, if he's rolling, he's confident. Why not go for the win? You know, it's sports. You want the win. You don't want the tie. Second, the Celtics seem to be coming on health-wise when the Heat were the haggard, the walking wounded. So he hasn't come out and said this, but to me it makes a lot of sense that, yeah, it's not just one more play. If you make the three, it's one more play. If you make a two, you have to get a stop, and then you have to play 5 minutes of overtime. And didn't have PJ Tucker didn't play the entire second half. Hero didn't play the entire second half. We saw what Jimmy Butler was game 4 and 5 and whatever magic stuff they shot him with in game 6 and 7. He played 48 minutes in game 7. Like, do they have 5 minutes in them? Or do they just need to do one play? So that 3 makes it a one play game instead of 5 minutes. So it made a lot of sense from many different angles. To me, at least when I started looking at it from that point of view.
I completely agree with you on that one, Lubie. And even though Defo would be laughing at us for agreeing with you, but you're absolutely right. It makes it, one play, and it gives them a chance to get back and put their onus on the defense. Here's a secret: players, I don't care how great they are, yes, they want to live in that moment and be the hero and make the game-winning shot. But at the end of the day, that's the visual. But the team would rather say, let's win it on defense. Let's make our final play on defense getting the stop. And that's what would have happened if Jimmy Butler had converted on that 3. Would have put the onus on the defense. And when you put the onus on the defense, it's all 5 guys who are on the floor rather than putting the onus on offense, and it's one guy. So, like I said, you ask those guys, the Michael Jordans of the world, the Jimmy Butlers, they all want to take that shot to win the game. But if you ask the team, they would rather put the onus on our defense and let all 5 of us contribute to making one stop. They've got a better opportunity, a better chance when that happens.
And Grant, going into that game, it's funny. You're right. It's over a week ago. So actually 2 weeks because they took like a week off before the finals. It feels forever ago, but going into that game, going into the final 2 games, it felt like the series was over because of what we saw from Jimmy Butler in game 4 and 5. You were around this league a long time. You played over 15 seasons, and you've kept in close contact covering it, both with the Thunder, now with the Pistons, and just, analyzing the league at large. What? You can't speak specifics, and I get it. But when you see a guy is scoring 7 points, 13 points in 2 consecutive games, then goes for 40-something and 30-something, playing 45 minutes and 48 minutes. What are some of the things that is going on behind the scenes? And I get it. Dwayne Wade called him, and Pat Riley reached out to him, and, he went to Gandhi. And I get it. All the motivating things happen. But come on. Like, my first reaction is, wow, they found some fire. Like, they found some old school 1980s shit to wake his ass up. Like, you're around it. You see the way Jimmy Butler played in 4 and 5. The knee didn't go away. Like, you know that. When you have knee swelling like that, it takes time to go away. What are some of the kind of things, if you can peel the curtain back, that goes on to get you physically ready on top of mentally ready?
Well, I think the mental aspect of it is already there. You have to understand that once you start, and I'm not even going to start saying once you start playing in the NBA, there's a certain caliber of player who understands once they start playing basketball, they're never going to be 100%. Now you're dealing with a matter of how much pain can you deal with? How much are you going to say, you know what, I'm going to play anyway, and I'll live with the results of my injury tomorrow a week or in the off season. And I think Jimmy Butler has been playing hurt, so to speak.
Yeah.
I would say he's been playing hurt, so to speak, for a very, very, very long time. And maybe it just mounted up where it got to the point where he couldn't play any longer and be effective until he had maybe a shot, maybe ice bath or whatever the case may be. He got something there to get himself prepared. He was already prepared mentally. And also, let me say this. You have to go back to Jimmy Butler's character on this Miami Heat team. He has always relied heavily in giving his teammates a lot of opportunities to carry the team. It's not always, I've said this about Jimmy since he arrived in Miami. He may be the feature guy, but that team wins because all 5 or all 15 guys are major contributors. And a lot of that has to do with Jimmy Butler saying, hey, guys, don't look at me every play. Go be excellent basketball players. Go make a play for our team. Don't wait for me to do it. So he's instilled a lot of confidence in his teammates. So that, I would believe, has a lot to do with, okay, let me sit back because I trust these guys can get it done. Now, when they didn't get it done, he said, okay, I've got to go and put on this Superman cape. And maybe if I lead by example, they'll follow. And that's what I saw when he came out and got that 45 or whatever he got that night. He felt like, okay, if I go do this, they'll follow.
Yeah, at 47.
That's a simple.
It was like a LeBron game at 47, 9, and 8. Game 6 in Boston to supersede in a lot of ways what LeBron did in 2012 for the Heat. Before we move on to the finals, I just on this, because you said something that's interesting and you even sort of chuckled. And that's the thing is, as people who only played up until a certain level and then just play for fun the rest of their lives, getting shot up with something is a term we use when we cover and talk about sports, but we really don't know what it means. I have to, since we have you, and you were a guy that was both talented and heart and hustle. So I'm sure we know what kind of war you were going out there gutting it out under crazy circumstances. What is it when they quote unquote shoot you up ice bath, whatever the hell you want to call it, to get you from one place to another place? And in this day and age, as opposed to other eras, it's on the player as much as the team. The team a lot of the time will tell the player no, and the player's like, no, I want to do it, and it's on the player. So it's not just, any given Sunday, James Woods' characters telling LT he's okay when his knee's freaking shredded. Like, it's mutual, if not even more the player than the team these days. Like, and I'm putting that out there totally honestly. But even then, like physically, like what change? Like when they take whatever they take and loosen you up to the point where it's not going to hurt you more, but you're definitely able to withstand the pain. Like, what is the like as a player that's had that happen? I'm just curious. Like, what do you feel? Does it go numb? Like, how does it help you so much? Because we'll see players have such a difference in play after things like that happen.
And you're right. It's two schools of thought on that one, because you could take something, you could get a shot, and it will numb the pain, and you can go out there and play, and you won't even know that you have an injury.
Oh wow! But
that's where the team, the coach, everybody comes in a room and they say, okay, if we do this, it's like if you could take a shot and you no longer feel like you have a broken wrist or a broken finger, yet because you don't feel it, you're going to go out there and play like it's not broken. Yeah. But if you do a certain thing, you're going to injure it more. You just don't feel it. Mm-hmm. You could break it again. You could break your other fingers because you don't feel that pain. Mm. So you have to ask yourself, and that's when the collective people come in and say, is this going to be detrimental? Even though he doesn't feel it, is it going to hurt himself? Is he going to hurt himself further, with this numbness if he goes out and plays? And if the determination has been, and if it's been determined to say it's not going to further do him any harm, then let's proceed. Let's go. Everybody, the player, the coach, and everybody else is on board with that.
All right, so Tony, you brought up something that's been a big part of the finals so far. We're through 2 games. It's 1-1. Warriors have had 2 tremendous third quarters. Celtics had a fourth quarter for a lifetime in game 1, and then the Warriors just sort of extended the third quarter lead so much last night in game 2 that Celtics couldn't catch up. I mean, Udoka literally sat as starters the entire fourth quarter. We've seen the role players, and this is the biggest part of series of this nature, where what role players will shine. You expect to get your stars to get their 15, 20, 25, 30. It's what role players will shine. Game 1, Smart had 18, Horford had 26, White had 21. Last night, Smart and Horford combined for 4, and White had 12. And you saw Jordan Poole, who had 9 in game 1 last night. Yeah, he only had 17, but he had the 2 biggest shots of the night, where he took a 17-point lead out to 23, and then the Warriors never looked back. I've asked you this before because it's something you've been a starter, you've been a role player, and I'm always intrigued to see the ebb and flow in the playoff role players. What changes? Is it the crowd? Is it the emotion? Is it, we know basketball is not a perfect science? Like, to see the Celtics guys be so effective in game 1 and be so ineffective in game 2 is very interesting to me.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And you have to understand, too, the Golden State Warriors in game 1 had a terrible third quarter. And they are one of the best teams in the league at point production in the third quarter. And that's what you saw in game 2. No matter what the lead is, if they have a lead or if they have a deficit at halftime, it's always been their saving grace that they come out in the third quarter. And if you go back, they probably won every third quarter or a great amount of third quarters throughout the season, because that's their best quarter typically, because that's when they put their points on the board. So that was the fact that they couldn't do that in game 1. You followed the team. You knew that they were going to come back in game 2 and go back to their bread and butter and make shots in that third quarter. Now, to answer your question about the role player and what changes, it's not necessarily what the coach is doing or what the other players are doing. When you're on the road, you're a completely different player. You're not as comfortable doing or trying things on the road as you would be at home if you're a role player. You also have to think of the mentality of a role player. If a role player is a guy that averages 6 or 7 points and is an energy guy and this and that, and all of a sudden he comes out and scores 17 points, he's out of his element. He's completely out of his element. So don't look for him to do that again in another game, because something it just aligned perfectly for him to have those 17 points. Somebody else, one of those stars, didn't get his shots when a role player comes out with a 20-point game, a 17-point game. When you see the next game, everything goes back to normal, and that role player is going to go back to what he's accustomed to doing. They're not accustomed to getting 18, 19, or 15 shots in a game. That's just not what they're accustomed to doing, and their mentality is not going to allow them to all of a sudden, in the biggest game of their career, come out in 4 games and take 17 shots, take 15 shots if they're used to getting 4 or 5 or 6 shots. It's just not going to happen.
Well, and we saw game 1 and 2, the difference was that fourth quarter where the Celtics couldn't miss, and the Warriors, it felt like their defense intensity sort of slacked. Game 4, the Warriors did just put the clamps on it in the third quarter and never gave up. That's the thing. That's always something I'm interested in. And us here in sports media, we talk about the intangible things, the intensity, hard hustle, wanting it more. And obviously, it's the freaking NBA Finals. Like, everyone wants it desperately. Like, there's no either team. If you're the Warriors, you don't know if you're going to do it again. If you're the Celtics, they fought, been in the conference finals, and haven't won one since the 2010s and went a couple decades without winning one in Boston. We know what winning means in Boston for the Celtics. So they all want it desperately. However, you'll watch games and, like, especially game 1, watching the Warriors, that fourth quarter, to me, it just, as much as effort isn't intangible, it felt tangible. Like, you could see the Celtics fighting for their life, and it felt like the Warriors were like, like, you've been involved in locker rooms. When you can feel the intensity waning, what happens? Because I'm watching the game going, what Warriors is this? Like, why is this such a different team than we saw in the third quarter? Whereas I'll give the Celtics credit. They're a rare team where they don't go through those ebbs and flows. They're not always great, but they play hard every minute of every game. And other teams like the Warriors, the Heat, even the Bucks will have these moments where they sort of come down. Like, what is it to be a part of that as a player? Because you played in so many different games with so many different things at stake.
That's one of those rare items where everybody's on the same page and they're in sync feeling what you just described. And everybody that's playing, everybody that comes into the game is not going to let the intensity wane. They're not going to take it down a level. In fact, the guys that come into the game are prepared to even take that up a notch or at least maintain what's already been going on. That's when you have guys who are totally focused and locked in. And I'm not saying guys are not focused. It just takes a special, unique moment where everybody's aligned and doing the same thing and are on the same page. Everybody wants to, but it doesn't happen all the time. And when you see stuff like that, it's rare that everybody's on the same page and it's working. And it's actually working. That's what you celebrate. So, like I said, it doesn't happen every game, although it's attempted every game. It just doesn't happen every game. So when you see a team that's out there with their intensity and it's not waning, that's one of those special, rare moments that as a player that you shoot for, that you attempt to do every night. It just happens, though. It doesn't happen every single night, but it's definitely attempted.
Grant Long, current Detroit Pistons analyst, longtime NBA player, longtime NBA analyst. Follow him on Twitter at Grant Long 43. All right, we have a 1-1 series, Grant, heading Game 3 to Boston for Wednesday. Where do you see this series turning? To me, last night felt like sort of a turning point where the Warriors sort of put their blueprint to work, and that's sort of what we've seen from the Warriors the last 8 years, where they mess around, but then they eventually pull away. However, if you're Boston, you sort of got to be happy. You got your game. You now flipped home court. Where do you see the series going the rest of the way?
This is going to be a tough series. In game 2, everybody who is a Warriors fan said, okay, now that's the Warriors that I said was going to win the series. Yep. That's the team that I know that can win. Well, team that played in game 1, they didn't play the Warrior style of basketball for a very good reason. A very good, determined defensive effort by the Boston Celtics. And you have to give Ime Udoka a lot of credit. Remember, he's a first-year coach, and he's in the finals. Yep. A first-year head coach, and he's in the finals with this Boston Celtics team that Brad Stevens couldn't get there. Now, Brad Stevens is the general manager of the Boston Celtics, so they're on the same page. They're working together. But this was a tremendous hire by the Boston Celtics. We cannot let this go unnoticed, that this is a first-year head coach, and he's in the finals with the Boston Celtics. Now, if you go back, you and myself and Defo, we talked about in the Eastern Conference. I said there were 2 teams, the Miami Heat and the Boston Celtics, who play as a complete team. They've been playing well defensively, took out Brooklyn, took out the Milwaukee Bucks. They are playing an outstanding brand of basketball on both sides. And if they win this series, I'm not surprised. But, and this is going to sound like I'm not picking a side, but Golden State could win, and it will be no surprise either. This is not the one where you say, oh, Golden State's going to win this walking away. They could, but if the Boston Celtics win, go back to how they got here and the teams that they beat and the way that they're playing, the defense that they played on Kevin Durant that shut him down, that he was ineffective. So they got the whole package. Defensively, they're sound as a team. Offensively, they got stars, and they've got role players. So if they win, it wouldn't be a surprise either. Sometimes you have to say, and you've heard this before, it just seems like it was their destiny to win this year. Yeah. And like I said, the path that they took to get to this point, you could go back in their wake and say, wow, this is their year to get here and possibly win it. So that's why I wouldn't be surprised if Boston wins. Now, having said all that, I still think Golden State's going to win because of how they play in the third quarter. And no matter how well you play, for the first time in game 1, no matter how well the opponent plays, what Golden State has in their back pocket is when the third quarter comes out and we all hit our threes, no matter what the deficit is, they seem to come back and win the basketball game. It's happened more times than not. So that's why I give the nod to the Golden State Warriors. And you have to think, you mentioned Jordan Poole earlier. Wasn't effective in game 1. Didn't have an outstanding game in game 2, but he was effective. They're still waiting on Klay Thompson to arrive and contribute offensively. And once he does that, I mean, they're off and running. It's not a whole lot you can do if all 3 of those guys are making their shots.
Well, and that's what the Celtics are banking on is their defensive intensity for 4 quarters, for 48 minutes. The Warriors won't be able to have all 3 or 4 of their guys. And so far, they've been right. We'll see if that persists. Before we go, I have to ask you about this because it is an interesting situation that we see in sports all the time. Successful coach leaves team realizing they've gone as far as they can. Quinn Snyder is a guy that the Lakers were really interested in. Snyder didn't want the job. Quinn Snyder's a guy that the Utah Jazz wanted to keep because he's gotten them to this level where they're in the playoffs every year. They have the longest active playoff streak in the NBA right now. Most people probably don't even know that. They made a conference finals. They have a guy who's multiple defensive player of the year. They have a guy in Donovan Mitchell who's become a top 20 every single year all-star kind of guy. yet they have sort of hit a plateau. What are your thoughts on Quinn Snyder leaving the Jazz? In sports, we see this with coaches where they say this, and it's another cliche, but it seems to ring true. My message is falling on deaf ears. My message has lost, its weight. You've been around ball clubs. Like, does that happen when, like, a coach, the fire and the brimstone worked for the first 6 years, but, like, by 7 and 8, you're like, okay, dude, we've heard this. Because it feels like that's what Snyder's admitting to, and he's owning it. And he's like, look, for me and for the team, this isn't working. We're only going to get so far. Like, have you been around that? Like, how real is that? Because to me, it seems sort of hinky, but we see it a lot in sports, and it feels like coaches and players really believe it.
Well, there's two schools of thought, because now I'm thinking, there's not another coaching opportunity out there.
No,
I don't believe, for him to close the door on the Jazz and now sit and wait idly for that other opportunity to open up. So I would have to say this is a genuine move on his part, saying, listen, I can't take this team any further than we've gone over the last 7-8 years. We've been a very good competitive team. We've got stars, but as a coach, I can't get any more out of this than I've gotten out of these players. So maybe, and you've heard this before, maybe it's time for the other coach to take them to the next plateau. I've taken them as far as I can take them. If you go back a few years, a lot of years, I should say, and Larry Bird used to have this old adage. He said, I won't coach 10, 12 years. I just won't do that, because players they'll start to tune your voice out after about 3 or 4 or 5 years. And he understands that. Remember, he's a Hall of Famer, top 75 legendary player. He himself saying, as a player, you tune that coach out after 4 or 5 years. So he won't stay on the coaching side and coach the same team for more than that, because players need a new voice if they're going to continue to excel and ascend to the top. And maybe that's where Quinn Snyder is. He's one of those guys who says, listen, they're not hearing me anymore. My voice is annoying to them. They need a new voice. And I'm going to sacrifice myself. As we always say, you sacrifice yourself for the betterment of the team. And like I said, you looking at it from afar, there's no other opportunities. Remember, he was rumored to take that Laker job, but that Laker job is gone now. So there's no other job that he's sitting down for to go take. So you have to give it on its merit and say, that's just what he's doing. He's sacrificing himself for the team.
Yeah, I mean, look, so often in sports when coaches talk, we just laugh, because we know coaches are there not to give you the truth. They're there to sort of fool you into believing something so they can do what they want to do. I mean, but with this, I believe him. Like, they wanted him. They were trying to give him an extension. He didn't want it. And it feels like not even that he was burnt out, because he's openly said, I want us to coach. He said what you just said, and it makes sense. He's not angling for another job. There's no other job right now. He's not trying to go back to Duke. John Shire's ready to go. Like, the Lakers wanted him. He was their first choice. The Jazz wanted him. It feels like he's realized, look, I can't do more with this, and it's not worth it for the team, and it's not worth it for me. Both of us, we're just going to beat our heads against the wall and not get any farther. Someone else has to switch it up and take them to the next level. It's just, to me, rare to see that. Like, usually when that...
It's very rare. And then think about this. Everybody already think that team, you mentioned it, Rudy Gobert, 2-time Defensive Player of the Year. You've got what some would call a bona fide star in Donovan Mitchell. At some point, and you know how this goes, Lubie,
yep.
At some point, the finger will start to point at Quinn Snyder as not good enough.
Yeah.
And he's probably, he could jump off the ship right now before the finger pointing starts. And remember, supposedly there's some tension between Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert. I don't know how true that is. It's rumored that it is. And if this whole thing goes sideways, next season, he's going to look bad. And maybe he's getting a pulse on this and saying there's nothing he can do about it. Those guys are at each other's, heads, and it's not going to look pretty next year when those guys take the court together. So,
Grant,
maybe he's getting out too. Right? Maybe he's getting out early.
Yeah. Oh, that's smart. And we always feel smarter after we talk to you. Grant, enjoy the rest of the finals. We'll probably talk to you before it ends. But do appreciate your time this morning. Hopefully you had a great weekend. Everything's going well. And we'll talk again soon. Thanks a lot, Grant.
Thank you, Lubie.
Big thank you to Grant Long for joining me today on the Defo Show. No Defo, just Lubie here on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. He, like me, thinks the Warriors will win in 5. He gives the Celtics a lot of credit because of their not only tenacity, but their defensive ability. And we've seen that. That's kept them in the games for the first halves, both games. Now, in the third quarter, the Warriors dominated both game 1 and game 2. The difference is game 1, they let the Celtics in at the end of the third quarter, and that allowed the Celtics to go on their own run in the fourth, and they were lights out, and they won 121-108. In game 2, the Warriors finished the third quarter strong. Jordan Poole hits 2 ridiculous threes, takes it out to a 23-point lead, and they start the fourth with the first 6 points. So they go up 29. Udoka sits his starters from that point on, and the Warriors win game 2, 107-88. Now we have a 1-1 series heading back to Boston Wednesday for game 3. I feel like we'll see this Warriors more often than not. I still think it has to at least go 5. I mean, the Celtics have won a game, but it'll probably go 6. You'll see Boston be scrappy. You'll see the Warriors have their moments where they're But in the end, the Warriors are just better. Like, Horford Tatum only gave you 12. And last night he gave you 28. That's true. But Horford gave you 26. White gave you 21. And Smart gave you 18. Horford and Smart combined gave you 4 last night. And White gave you 12. And Jordan Poole gave you 9 and then gave you 17. I trust the Warriors role players to play well more than I trust the Celtics role players to play well. And the Warriors stars are better. You still haven't even seen Draymond Green really do much on offense outside of being an agitator. And you haven't seen Klay Thompson do anything at 11 points last night. So at some point, those guys come. It's even scarier for the Celtics. So to me, still feels like a 6-game series. But the Celtics have at least got their 1. And that's what they wanted. In essence, getting a split. The Warriors have now lost home court advantage. We'll see if the Warriors can get it back in Boston on Wednesday. You will have Defo back tomorrow. Big thank you to Grant Long. Thank you for tuning in. Check us out each and every morning. Just Google The Defo Show, DEFO. Also, our exclusive content podcast, The Believe Network, BLEAV.com. Search After Hours. And each and every day, our South Florida content right here. The Defo Show. Today, no Defo. Tomorrow, you will get Defo with Lubie on the 5 Reasons Sports Network.
Play the ponies in style at Champions, the outstanding simulcasting room at beautiful Hialeah Park. Yes, the grand old lady of thoroughbred racing has never been more vibrant, and you can wager on the races from the top tracks around the country while enjoying a cocktail at the Brass Rail Bar or any of the fine food served throughout the facility. If poker is your game, you're covered in style, and you can play all your favorite Vegas-style games, including blackjack, craps, and roulette, in Hialeah Park's sizzling hot casino. Get a player's card when you walk through the door for all kinds of generous amenities, including our favorite, free play, when you come out to the ultimate casino and entertainment destination, Hialeah Park.
Hey folks, Tony Segreto here. Since day one, Catholic Health Services has been part of Old School. And since we've started letting people know about them, it's changed their lives. You see, Catholic Health Services, while being recognized as one of the top places for stroke rehab in the country, it's also about a group of people who not just excel in what they do, from the doctors to the nurses to the therapist, on and on and on. It's how they do what they do every single day that separates them from the pack. They do it with a passion, unmatched, and the inclusion of family in every step of the process. Trust me when I tell you this. If you want the best, unmatched rehab with a special group of skilled, caring people, there is truly only one place, and that one place is Catholic Health Services.